faith stories,
My now wife Chelsea was like, "Hey, you're coming to church with me on Sunday," and I was like, "All right, I've been looking at the Bible. Let's do this."
fishing memories.
When I first started, I was just fish, focus on the fish. And I see the kid catch a fish, I'm like, good job, perfect, awesome. And then he goes up there and I'm like, we're catching slot snook. And this kid's up here going, oh, the breeze. I'm like, this is exactly what it's about.
Meaningful conversations.
You have to stay in the Word. You have to have a good support system. You have to know what the end goal is. You have to know who God is.
Positivity. This is the Faith and Fishing Podcast. With your hosts, Cam Steele.
If your identity is you're an angler, whenever you're not doing well in the water, that's whenever you can't be content.
And Robert Randolph.
And his timing is perfect. We might not always agree with it, and we might not always understand it at the moment.
Bring you interviews with some amazing guests from the fishing community and discuss all things to do with fishing and their faith. Welcome to the family.
Hey y'all, welcome back to the Faith and Fishing Podcast. I'm Cam, and if you were watching this on YouTube, you can tell I am by myself right now. Do not have my partner in crime right now, Robert. He is getting ready for Lake Murray. He leaves out pretty early tomorrow morning, and he is heading down for the Bass Nation tournament down there. So by the time y'all are listening to this, we know how he did, but at the moment, I definitely do not. So we are wishing him luck, wishing him safe travels and all that good stuff. He hopefully will stop by this evening, but there's a solid chance it will be me with our guest for the whole episode. So we're going old school tonight, or this morning or today, whatever time you're listening to this. So we've got an awesome guest that I'm really looking forward to. First, I did want to kind of drop some news. Let me pull it up here. Wednesday, April 17th at 9 p.m. Eastern time, which I know is kind of late for us Easterners, but for everybody else, it should be pretty doable. We are going to be having a live episode. So that means that week's episode will be a day late on the podcast platforms. But we are going to be having a live episode because April 14th was whenever the very first episode of Faith and Fishing Podcast dropped in 2020. And so we are going to be celebrating our fourth year of the podcast. We're going to have a lot of guests that are the kind of like, they are part of what made Faith and Fishing what it is. Some of them I'm really hoping to get on that really kind of pave the way and really kind of help shape the podcast. So go ahead and mark that down on your calendars. In terms of news and anything like that, that's about all I've got. Not a lot of housekeeping, and no fishing since last episode. You're going to be hearing that a lot this year, I think. But yeah, so let's go ahead and let's say thank you to Get Outdoors, and then we will jump into it.
Get Outdoors Pedal and Paddle is one of the largest canoe, kayak, and cycling retailers in the Southeast, with a huge selection of kayaks, canoes, bikes, and all the accessories needed to experience paddling and cycling comfortably and safely. Get Outdoors helps to expand and educate the paddling community through their free demos held on local lakes in the Greensboro, North Carolina area, and through in-store clinics and on the water courses and demos, and will even get your new boat rigged up for kayak fishing for you. Stop by the shop in Greensboro, North Carolina, or visit them online at shopgetoutdoors.com to be wowed by their selection.
All right, so this episode we have Andy Dill, who is the bearded paddler. on YouTube. And I'm excited to talk to him because if y'all have listened to the podcast, y'all know that whenever we start talking to somebody who really knows kayaks, we really start to nerd out with them, and I'm excited about it. So let's go ahead and get him in here. If you were watching on YouTube, you understand the name, the Bearded Paddler, and man, that is probably the nicest beard we have ever had on the show, brother.
I appreciate that. I try. I work at it.
Absolutely, man. So go ahead, introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us who Andy Dill is.
Okay. Well, again, Andy Dill. I've grown up here in Arkansas, North Arkansas, pretty much my whole life. I was actually born in Southern California, just outside of Riverside. But we moved out here. God, I wasn't even a year old, so I don't have any recollection of it. I still have a sister and her kids out there, but moved out here and just grew up in one of the most beautiful parts of the country, in my opinion, a little town called Snowball, Arkansas, right on the Buffalo National River. We were walking distance from it. So I grew up just surrounded by outdoors, fishing, hunting. I really took to the fishing a lot more. I love being by the water. I love swimming, and got my first boat, a little old aluminum boat with the oars on the side of it. I was probably about 10 years old, paid $100 for it, just mowing lawns and stuff. And it opened up my eyes to a different type of fishing. So that's the closest thing to a kayak, I guess, back then, was kind of getting into some of those shallows, being able to paddle around up and downstream and carrying some gear with you, being efficient on, where I'm storing stuff. And, so growing up down here, everybody, your family with everybody. And we just, I always kind of, I think when you're younger, you just tend to take it for granted. But as you get older, you really yearn to get back to that. So we had just the old white church house, Southern Baptist, and we always had events, obviously at the church, but at the preacher's house. And Glenn Griffin was his name, and he was just a close family friend. He spoke at my dad's funeral. One of the nicest people I've ever been around, and it was my first exposure to community. So that's definitely something that's one of those early childhood memories that I just hold near and dear, is how that community was, how close that church was. And, it's always something that I think, especially when you're talking about faith, is a lot of people, look for when they're looking for, especially if you're moving out of the area, you go to a new city or town and you're looking for something like that. And that's hard to find. And I've just really, really learned that, especially at this point in life, is, you appreciating, it gave me growing up the way I grew up, it gave me a lot of appreciation for what I've got, so, but definitely, the whole YouTube thing, I started doing that actually last February. So I'm right at a year now. I work for one of the larger kayak retail stores in the country. I definitely like that you have a, Get Outdoors. I'm not familiar with them, but I love that you're supporting a paddle shop. That's one thing that I think is probably going to be more focused on this year, is supporting those local shops, because those are small local businesses. Those are family owned businesses. These are not big box stores and big corporations. And it's become a space that's very hard to survive. And that's one of the reasons I started the channel. Was I live in a town of about 800 people, and we work out of a shop that really is hard to find if you're not really looking for it. So kind of getting the word out, albeit nationally, but definitely locally here and in the state of Arkansas and Missouri and Oklahoma there. But I definitely like to see that. I'm not one of those people that say, the only place to buy a kayak is for me. No, there's places out of there, and they're starting to shrink. There's some of those that are really starting to struggle. The space is getting pretty crowded now. And even some of the companies are shipping directly to customer, which does kind of cut a lot of those people out. And it makes it harder on the customer too. And that's definitely, the economics of it. I won't bore people on that, but, those shops are the ones that service people. A lot of times you can get better prices from those shops than you can online, which is surprising. But yeah, I love going to other paddle shops and seeing how they run and what kind of inventory and how their people are. And they're always just the best people. I've never had a bad experience at somebody else's paddle shop.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's touch on that real quick. What is the name of your paddle shop?
Yeah, so I work for a company called Ozark Mountain Trading Company, or OMTC. See across here. You can go to our website and check us out. It's ozarkmtc.com, as in marytomcharlie.com. Again, we've got 4 locations here in Cotter, Arkansas. We have one in over there by Pea Ridge, Arkansas, and then Siloam Springs, Arkansas. And we have one up in Ozark, Missouri, just between Branson and Springfield, Missouri. So again, owned by a family, phenomenal people to work for and work with. And, it's really like a family. I've been in sales for probably about 18 years, and I've worked corporate world. I've worked a lot of places, and it's just not really my style and not really what I enjoyed. And working for those smaller businesses, smaller local businesses, has always been kind of a joy to me. And I really kind of fell into this because I live maybe a mile from the shop, and they needed a manager. I was in the insurance industry before in sales, but I knew I was kind of looking for something a little bit different and a little bit, on that next step. And me and my wife were customers of this shop before I worked there. So we knew of it. We were really big fans of it. And when we saw that opened up, I told Christina, my wife, I was like, let me just talk to him and see what's about. And talk to the owner. He came down and met with me. And then the next day I was offered the job, and I'm like, okay, well, we talked it over a little bit and thought about it a lot, and then took it. And it's been a great experience. It really has.
For sure. I was going to ask how a paddle shop in a town of 800 people ended up being one of the largest ones in the country, but with four
overall
locations, that makes
and our location is one of the bigger ones. We have a warehouse. So one of our biggest things that we're going to have is we're always going to have inventory. And we carry really quality brands, which I'm a big fan of. I'm always going to be a fan over quality. And, Native, Bonafide, Jackson, Hobie, like all the big names are in there. Our location here in Cotter is actually signed up to be with Old Town. So we're going to start doing Old Town Kayak after reaching out to them. And, it's an exciting time. I think the whole kayak industry is in a bit of a transition. So it got... And during COVID, that's what everyone wanted to do. Everyone had stimulus money burning a hole in their pocket if they didn't need it to pay bills, or if they weren't, if they didn't have the hardships that some people got during that time. Well, they were going into RVing, they were going into kayaking, and just anything outdoors. And kayak fishing just kind of exploded. So people were buying kayaks and just left and right. They weren't even doing research. They just see something, I want that. And it was hard for us to get certain kayaks, and some kayaks we just couldn't get at all. I think we normally carry overall anywhere from 1,000 to 1,200 kayaks in stock, and I think at one point we got down to about 8. So it got pretty thin there for a while, and it sounds like a great problem to have, and it really wasn't. You get people coming in, they're eager to buy, and you didn't have anything to sell them. And, a lot of people were going online, and a lot of these kayak companies were popping up out of nowhere, and, great pricing, really, really cheap. And it looked very similar. And that was kind of what happened, is a lot of things got saturated. And now you're seeing that correct, where you're seeing the used market, just that bubble has finally burst. Everyone's got kayaks they're trying to sell, and kayaks that are all rigged up, and some of them never been in the water. And, during that time, some of those people were able to sell their kayaks for almost what they paid for them a couple of years earlier. And now it's, again, that bubble's burst, and there's so many of them out there for sale, and then people are having to go cheaper and cheaper to sell them, and it's kind of dropped the price down quite a bit on those. It's no good for the people that own those kayaks, but it's great for somebody looking to get out there and get started and get into a quality kayak for a really good price. If they can't afford the brand new prices, there's some options out there that they can get into, and quality options. So I always tell people if they got kind of a lower budget, but they're wanting something really good quality, the used market right now is kind of the place to be. I think that's going to correct itself here within this year, but there's a lot for sale. You go on Facebook Marketplace and all that. I mean, they're all over the place.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, that's kind of a good segue. With the person wanting to get into it, a very valuable resource to them is the Bearded Paddler YouTube channel. So let's kind of get the lowdown on the YouTube channel. Tell us what it's all about and how it came about and all that good stuff.
And this is going to sound funny, but when I first started working, I was hired in February of 2021, and I knew some about some of the kayaks. I'd had friends that had been kayak fishing for a few years before I even thought about it. And so I needed, being the manager, being the person running this store, and people underneath me working in there too, I didn't want to be the person that knew the least amount. So I just dove in, and I did what a lot of people do when they're looking for a kayak, is watching YouTube videos, watching stuff. And the more I got to learn about the actual boats, it was actually taking each kayak out on the water, albeit river or lake, and learning a lot about it. Well, what happened was some of the YouTube videos that I'm watching, the information just wasn't very good on some of them, or some of it was just downright inaccurate. And we were getting customers coming in saying, hey, I was watching a YouTube video and I saw this. And we have to say, well, that's not really true, or that's actually not very safe. And then it was a hurdle that we were having to overcome. So I was sitting around one day and it was really slow, again, February, in a kayak shop. And I thought, well, I can do this. So we just got a Bonafide Kayaks river kayak, the RVR 119. I just took my cell phone out and I'm filming it and I'm talking. And it's literally just my cell phone pointed at it. And you can see my earlier videos, you can just see my finger pointing at different things. I'm doing close-ups and all that. And it just kind of morphed into something. It was received really well. My first video actually did really well because we were one of the first ones in the country to get that kayak. And I thought, well, nobody else is doing this right now. I can do this, and kind of learn on the fly, which I did. It started out me just holding the phone and talking, and no editing, just uploading it directly to YouTube, and wasn't thinking about thumbnails or descriptions or titles or anything. I just threw it up there, and some of it stuck, some of it didn't. But I started to enjoy it, and I started to enjoy the feedback and the interactions you get with people. So people always want to ask questions. I have access to this stuff, so that's kind of my unfair advantage, is I have access to all this stuff. So if somebody wants to know, hey, what's the dimensions of this? If it's not on the website, okay, well, let me go over there and measure it. And, I'll do a short video or something, and then send it to them or put it up there. And it just kind of grew from there. It was always my intention to build a community. So, building the community where people are talking with each other and talking with me and reaching out to me. And, I'm not selling anything to them necessarily. That's just, that's kind of was my shtick there was, I wanted to do maybe a unbiased review. So, if we get kayaks in that are used, that somebody traded in that we don't sell but are popular, I'll do a pros and cons on it, but I'll also do pros and cons to kayaks that we sell, because there's no perfect kayak. There's no one kayak that fits all applications. And the one thing that I wanted to get out there was what questions you should ask yourself before you even start looking. And that's usually what kind of water you're floating on, rivers or lakes, what kind of budget you want to be within, and what do you want that kayak to do? In other words, what's your primary purpose? Are you hauling a lot of gear? Are you fishing off of it? You want a lot of storage? Usually when people ask those three questions or answer those three questions honestly to themselves, that narrows things down a lot. Usually you're looking at about 2 or 3 different kayaks, and then it's a lot easier instead of going on Facebook or YouTube saying, hey, I'm 6'2", 200 pounds. What's the best kayak for me? And then people just start throwing whatever kayak they're pedaling around, anything from a Hobie Pro Angler that's $5,500 all the way to, something they saw at a big box store for $300. And that person has just got more questions and answers now. They're confused. And sometimes people just don't do it. And my purpose has always been get on the water, get out there, and you're going to enjoy it. And I always tell people, buy your second kayak first. That's the biggest key. Even if it's not your budget, maybe wait a little bit, add a little bit to that budget. You'd be surprised what an extra $100, $150 will buy you. That's going to be a better seat, better storage, and just better overall comfort. And if someone's comfortable and they enjoy it, they're going to want to do it. Buy it with the intention that you're going to like it, but don't watch videos and see a big kayak that's just slammed out with lights and gear and fish finders and motors on the front and back. There's a purpose for that. I mean, there's a market for that. Don't get me wrong, but most people that are looking at that or wanting to do that are probably just going to enjoy the basic kayak first, and then getting in that kayak first before you start doing that. Because there's people that rig that stuff out in their garage before they even get it wet. And then life happens or something happens, and then they're trying to sell a kayak they've got $8,000 invested in, and it's never been on the water. I mean, they still don't even know if they like it or not. So
right. Yeah, there's a lot that you said there that I wanted to hit on. Because like you said with Facebook, like if you go up there and say, this is me, what kayak is best, you do get everybody is saying like, you need this, and it's the kayak that they paddle. I always want to go back and on every single one of those posts and ask everyone who's commented, how many kayaks have you been in?
Yes. Yeah. How many kayaks did you buy before you got to that point?
Because if you're dead set, this is the kayak for everybody, and it's the only one you've ever owned, then your opinion does not matter to me.
There may be some valid points that they can make, but there's so many quality kayaks out there, and even kayaks that we don't carry. But man, and you'll always get a few people on there. So I'm not throwing shade over the whole group, but there's always someone in there that says, hey, how much you want to spend? Or what kind of water are you on? I'm like, thank you so much, because you're helping that person, not, and again, you've got, I recently did a video talking about my frustrations with the kayak industry, and pro staffs are one of them. They're not all bad, but there are some out there that I would call aggressive, and they get on there, and it's the closest thing to cyberbullying I've ever seen on this space, where someone's out there, they're looking to spend $500 or $600. They just want to get on the water, and these people are trying to shove down a $2,000 lake kayak, and like, okay, like, nobody's saying that's a bad kayak, but that's not the kayak they're wanting, or they're just spitting out a brand, and they don't know. There's some micro influencers too that I call them. They're kind of, they may get a discount or a little bit of a leeway from that company, and they're just out. You see them. There's one company in specifically that here in the last few months, I see a lot of hoodoo. Usually when you look on those beginner Facebook groups, there's the first comment is usually someone saying, try hoodoo, or, try, and they're based out of, I think, Houston, but which one are they should they be looking at? And you see that same person's posting a lot of places. So, be careful the people trying to sell you something. Usually just answering those 3 questions I talked about, usually that will steer you in the right direction. If you're going to be on rivers, what's the best river kayak? What's the best river kayak if I'm wanting to just carry a couple of ultralight poles and some tackle and just easy paddling? That will really is, under $1,000 or under $1,500, if you want to go premium, but you don't have to spend $5,000 on a river kayak or on a lake kayak. That's one kayak specifically that a lot of people like to focus on, but you don't need that. If you're fishing competitively and you're looking at motors and electronics and you're using all of the features on that $5,000 kayak, there's some value there. But if you're someone that's going to be using it, once a week on the weekend, just kind of a little casual trip or something, just want to enjoy yourself, you don't need to spend $5,000 on a big elaborate kayak that you're not going to use half the features that are available on it. And that's kind of the point I always try to make to people is, there's a lot of value out there. Depending on what your needs are, there's a kayak out there that's probably going to fit all of those needs and be the perfect one for you specifically.
And I'm going to hurt some feelings here, but if you're a tournament angler and you've got 40 people in your tournament trail and you were consistently 31, 32, upgrading from your $1,200 kayak to a $5,000 kayak is not going to put you in the money.
Live scope is not going to put fish in the boat either. That's another thing, that I think live scope, you're going to see a lot more live scope features on kayaks moving forward, I think. And a lot of people, like I said, there's people out there, God bless them, they don't have a budget, and man, more power to them. But it's the same thing with live scope. Live scope does not make a bad fisher really good. It makes a great one even better. But it's not a technology that's just foolproof. There's people out there winning tournaments with no electronics. There's people winning tournaments with the little Garmin Striker 4 you can get at Walmart. I mean, it's the only thing that I use a fish finder for is water depth, water temperature, and just seeing how deep, see if there's a trough underneath me. But your instincts, your signs of life, that's my favorite thing with fishing. Signs of life. Are there birds? Can you see fish pop in the top of the water? There's a lot of herons around here, and I think they're the best fisher out there. And we're blessed. We have a lot of bald eagles around here too. So when you go to a little bend or a little inlet and you see all of that stuff going on, there's probably some fish in there. When you go in there and there's nothing going on, it's time to move on. You might throw it around a little bit if you want to, but so I don't really use the electronics that much. I purchased them and I used them for a little bit, and I found myself not really using it as much as I thought I would. Doesn't mean they're not valuable, of course, but you can get some really good deals on some of those units with side scan and all that. That's really nice. The live scope gets a little crazy. I mean, you're talking about spending more than your kayak is worth, even the high-end stuff, just on the electronics and the technology. But yeah, that's a really good point though, because I think the state championship in Arkansas, the kayak angler that won it was a woman, which I loved. You're starting to see more of that. And I said, my wife fishes. My wife actually had a better year in 2023 than I did. And she's a noob. So, just her favorite thing is to go to the stores and look at the plastics. And we've accumulated so many plastics that haven't even got wet just from us just overdoing it. But her just learning how to tie the knots, learning about color presentation and what works for her. And, it's been really neat to see her grow on that. But I love that. I love it. There's more women getting out and fishing, and I'm talking about serious fishing too, competitive fishing, travel fishing. For sure. There's a space for that. I mean, there's nothing that saying that, it's easier. It's not easier for a guy. It's just different. We've just, maybe been in it longer, but man, there's so many changes that's been made to fishing. The fundamentals are the same for the most part, but there's a lot of different stuff out there that kind of levels the playing field, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. I also wanted to go back to your statement of buy your second kayak first.
Yeah.
Because I'm very torn on that statement. I very much agree with it, but I also, there's part of me that's like, whatever gets you out on the water, do it.
Yeah.
So my progression was I started in a Sun Dolphin Journey 10, which was not the right kayak for me. And I have gone out on this limb many times before and said that is not the right kayak for anybody. Went from that to the 12-foot Pescador from Perception.
Yeah.
And then I went from that to a Pelican Catch 120, which I did not stay in for more than a couple months before I went to the Perception Pescador Pro 12-footer.
Man,
and then
Pescador Pro 12. I like that one. And I didn't mean to cut you off there, but
Oh, you're good.
that I did a video, and it's one of my first ones, but it was talking about the differences between a 10 and a 12-foot kayak. So Pescador Pro specifically makes a 10-foot version and a 12-foot version. Actually, the 10-foot's a little bit closer to 10 and a half, but still. And a lot of people shy away from that 12-footer. They go to the 10-footer because I feel like they get in what we call a river mindset. They think they got to have the shorter one that's going to maneuver. And people have been floating on 16-foot long canoes for years and years and years. But that 12-footer, I think that's one of the most underrated kayaks out there. It cuts to the water really nicely. It's usually the Pescador Pro, from what we sell, is usually their first introduction into a frame seat, and kind of show people how much of a game changer that can be. It's not the perfect kayak for everybody. I don't think it's the best tall person kayak. If you got a long inseam, the foot pegs don't go very far. For me, being tall as I am, it's harder for me to get into it. But the cockpit's the same size on the 10 or the 12 foot. You're just getting a longer nose storage and rear storage there.
Yeah. And of those kayaks, of all the kayaks I've paddled and owned, it is not the fastest, but it is still the best paddling kayak of the group. I'm in a Feel Free Moken 12.5 now, the version 2, which is, it's a really good kayak. I'm still falling in love with it. I haven't fully gone.
How long have you had it?
Yet. About a month. So,
okay. So it's okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Still really new. But the difference between that Sun Dolphin journey and the Pescador was unreal.
Yeah.
If nothing more than I've said it on this podcast multiple times, if nothing more than the quality of the plastic.
Yes.
I put a hatch in, the
little 6-inch round hatch.
Yeah, little hatch in the Sun Dolphin journey, and it was before I started my journey into let's call it manhood and collecting tools. I cut the hole with a pocket knife.
Hey,
and that tells you everything you need to know about the quality of the plastic of that Sun Dolphin.
Yeah.
It was. I still to this day don't understand how I did not sink it, because I was at the time, I was at the weight capacity without my gear. But to me, I watched YouTube to get into it, and was all into this guy Marty Zoffinger, and was seeing him deck out his little 8-foot Lifetime kayak, and was like, well, I can do that.
Is he the one that put the motor on it?
I don't.
You may have seen the video. I want to say it was a Pelican or a Lifetime. The guy put like a big outboard motor on the back of it and just put it in his pond, and he had kind of a weird setup there. But obviously it sunk it. But he was just kind of doing it as a joke. But it was one of the funniest things I've seen.
Yeah, Marty Zoffinger did it was like the poor man's fishing kayak down in Tampa Bay, and it was the red Lifetime with the big outriggers that he made out of fiberglass and and all that good stuff. And I was watching him, and I was like, oh, this is going to be great, because he can stand up in it and everything. And that's another thing, like you watch these YouTubers and see them do things in these kayaks, and it's like, one, they've had it for a long time. They're very comfortable in that boat. Two, like I'm 5'10", usually hovering around 225.
Okay.
Marty Zoffinger's 5'6", about 140.
Yep.
There's a big difference between what he can do and what I can do. So you have to take that into consideration too. So yeah, I do think the buy your second kayak first will have more people stay in the sport once they get into it.
Yeah.
But just do whatever you can to get out on the water kind of gets more people into the sport. So
yes. And, some people make a huge jump from first to second kayak. My point has always been, so I always take it to, so Perception makes a kayak called the Pescador 10. And it's just got that was our first kayak, one of the first kayaks that we bought. And me and my wife, we started recreational floating. I grew up fishing, but I hadn't, life got in the way, and career and moving around a little bit. And, I hadn't been fishing in years, and got out on the water. I'm like, hey, I'd kind of like to take a pole with me and just kind of throw it around, and caught a few. And, I grew up river fishing. So lake fishing was kind of a new thing to me. And, so we really enjoyed it. And then now working in the industry. So those of you that have that, what I call the sickness, you watch YouTube videos and you get, working at a paddle shop does not cure that whatsoever. I think I've owned about 8 different kayaks just since I've been working there. And, my wife's the same way. We've been in a little bit of everything, and there's always something new and great coming out. We're like, we gotta get rid of our kayak and think about upgrading. It was always the biggest joke with us was we got married on it was May 22nd, and usually in May is when we start floating again for the new year. And we always joke that we always upgrade our kayak, and that's our anniversary gift. So we went from the Pescador 10, which was her kayak. I bought a Wilderness Systems Ride 115, which I still think is I still wish I had that kayak. I still wish I wouldn't have got rid of that. But it was the best kayak I could afford at the time, and it was on sale at the time. They were discontinuing it, and it was just phenomenal. It was like 84 pounds though. So I'm 6'5", and I go between 260 and 270. So I needed something with a really robust weight capacity. That's actually kind of my saving grace with some of the cheaper kayaks, and I always say there's a difference between cheap and inexpensive. I'm talking about cheaper, the places you go and see these kayaks are the places everybody goes. So you're getting groceries and you see kayaks lined up outside. I'm like, that seems like it'd be fun. And I go look at them and I'm touching them and they're flexing. And one of them was laying down. I sat in it and the whole thing is just folding up. I'm like, okay, I'm not, I just knowing that that's probably not going to be the best situation for me. And then we went to the shop here where I work now. And, I was like, wow, this is really nice. And, so we bought these kayaks, paddle them around. And my second kayak was a New Canoe Frontier 12. So going from the Ride, which is a little bit more of a recreational, maybe river and creek, to a big 14-foot long or 12-foot long, 41-inch wide fishing kayak with a really high swivel seat. And I was in love. We couldn't fish enough. She bought a Jackson U-Pick, which we still have that kayak. We love that kayak. But yeah, just, I was telling her, I was like, if we would have bought the New Canoe and the Jackson first, we would have saved a lot of money. But we bought our first kayaks. I mean, we bought what we thought we wanted. We wanted to float and just paddle around and explore, which we still do, but we both started fishing more. So that's another thing that I tell people is allow your needs to evolve, because they will. You may start out just wanting to float. You may start out wanting to float and then maybe want to float eventually some maybe more adventurous water, or maybe like exploring around on the lake. You may start out wanting to go on the lake and then maybe want to go to rivers. So, just being honest with yourself sometimes, and it's hard to predict that stuff, of course, but your second kayak isn't necessarily your last kayak, but it can keep you in, like you said, that kayak a little bit longer, instead of spending $300 or $400 on something and then deciding really quickly, man, I really need to get into something else because this is uncomfortable and, it doesn't paddle well. It's very tippy. It's not very stable, and, it's not doing anything for me. So.
Yeah. And sometimes I feel like a lot of times potential people that would have been, long, like mainstays in the sport end up being like one and dones. They try it and they're like, oh, I can't stand this. This is what kayak fishing is. I can't do it.
Yeah.
So yeah, for sure. Well, so I want to kind of bring it back full circle a little bit, because you you mentioned community at the beginning, and then you kind of got started on your YouTube journey, and it seems like what kept you in, like what kept it going was the community
Yeah.
in YouTube. So it's cool how that kind of full circle goes. I wanted to kind of give you an opportunity to share your faith story a little bit, kind of what you believe in and how you came to believe that.
Well, growing up, I always struggled a little bit with belief. You know, and without getting too deep into it, my family was not exactly the best model family. My father specifically was older than my mother. He was a World War II vet, which I've always respected about him. But that generation was, they were different. My father's family was actually Okies, so they were in Oklahoma. They were very poor. They were a farming family. During the Dust Bowl, they migrated to California. The promises of work and everything, and that's kind of where we came to settle in California. That's where they kind of stayed at. He went to war. He came back. And then later in life met my mother, and then he retired, and then they moved to Arkansas, and that's kind of so. But he was always very versed in the Bible, and he could tell you everything. And one of the things that, in my opinion, set me back when I was younger was he made me at 12 read the book of Matthew, and for a 12-year-old, and I was a pretty good kid, I wasn't a troublemaker or anything, but to read that and put that fear in you, it really kind of, it scared me away from it a little bit. But the thing that kept me in it was the people that surrounded us. So we had a lot of really good people. I was very fortunate, and still some relationships that I carry today from that time. But again, having that experience as a church, and hearing about other people's experiences, they're not all the same, unfortunately. I prefer the smaller church versus the bigger. Biggers have their place. We've got a church around here locally that is like a rock show. The fog machines and the music playing, and they do the online cast, but that gets a younger crowd into it. I honestly, I prefer the smaller church house, that country setting. I know that's kind of old fashioned, but the people in there, talk about community again, pulling together if somebody has a hardship, somebody passes away, pulling together, doing a potluck, doing anything, doing car washes or anything like that to raise money for people. And I think that's what I've always had a very charitable heart, and I think that's where that come from, is being around that. I'm a board member of a local domestic abuse shelter here locally where we're at here. And, I've always had that. I've always, the company I work for, Ozark Mountain Trading Company, they do a lot of charity work. They do a lot of groups, a lot of local groups, the local fire department, and you get that in a small town. And I think that's what's always kind of kept me away from big city living is, you lose a lot of that. Subconsciously, I always loved it. But, when you're younger, you want to get away from where you grew up, and then you find yourself coming back to it because you realize it wasn't as bad as you thought.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, there's definitely something to be said for, both styles of worship, the big
absolutely.
church and the small church. There are some amazing people in both. There are some horrible people in both. And, that's what church is it's amazing and horrible people being
It's
amazing
society.
and horrible
Yes.
people.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely.
we, this episode is going back to community a lot. For sure. Awesome. Well, there are a couple questions that we ask every single guest that comes on, and wanted to make sure that we did not leave you out in that regard. So what fishing story or memory means the most to you?
Man. Well, I had an uncle, so my dad's brother. He was the one that bought my first boat, and that little aluminum paddle boat with the oars on the side. I just thought that was the greatest thing ever. And it was, a neighbor had it, again, community, one of our neighbors had one just sitting on top of a wood pile, and $100. And so he bought it for me. And then I was mowing his lawn and doing some work for him to pay that off. And I did everything. I took so much pride in that. I sanded it down. I shaker canned it silver. It leaked a little bit, so I'm putting JB Weld on. I'm doing everything I can to get this thing absolute premium. And I got the first time I took it out, I used to catfish a lot. So, treble hooks, chicken livers, things like that, and caught the biggest catfish I ever caught being in that boat. And I think that got me hooked, because we had a property where we had some ponds, some little farm ponds, and we had some bluegill in there and things like that. So started talking about catfish that we'd catch on the boat, and we lived close enough to where we can kind of drive them in a little 5-gallon bucket. And man, I loved it. And I feel like that experience shaped who I am specifically today, doing what I do, and realizing what it's like to go from a bank fisherman to being out on the water. And I always preferred, I've been at points, and even now, I mean, we can buy a boat if we wanted one. I've always preferred that, just from that one experience, catching really large bass or catfish or even gar. There's a lot of gar around here, and having a fish pull you around on a kayak a little bit, or a little boat like that. That's an excitement level you can't, if you could bottle it up, I'd be a rich man. And getting that excitement, especially in a kid, is what hooks them. That's, anytime you take a kid out, you want to take them to where there's a lot of action, a lot of bluegill, little worms on the hooks, teach them a little bit about it. And, but man, that was a good memory to me, because earning that boat, and then having a family member encourage it, and then getting out there and getting the result, and just kind of seeing what everybody else is doing. And now it's, sky's the limit. Kayak and boat, the lines are kind of blurred to an extent on some of that stuff out there. But that was probably one of my favorite memories, is getting out that first time. And I've always been a strong kid, but I remember how much that thing weighed. And I was so excited to get that thing out. I had baling wire all over it just to kind of keep it in the back of our farm truck. And I could not wait to drag that thing into the water. And I didn't even know if it floated. So, I mean, I could have easily just, thrown it in the river, and it could still be at the bottom. But yeah, just being out on the water, and I'm the only one out there. So the peace and the quiet, even at a young age, I've always loved that, seeing the birds, seeing the fish jump, and especially when it's really quiet out there, you'll see a lot of more wildlife, deer, there's elk out here now, otter, there's a lot of stuff out there to see. And just thinking, man, I felt like I'd never seen that before when I was sitting on the bank, but being out there on the boat, it just seemed, it was like you were more in tune with the water. It was not quite a religious experience, but it was pretty close to me at that age, because I was really looking for something to kind of cling on to.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned, being pulled around, and that's what hooks kids. So my son is going to be 3 in a couple weeks, and
Nice.
I took him fishing before he could walk. When he could stand up steadily.
Yeah.
I took him fishing. He caught his first fish on his 2nd birthday. Like he's all about it. And whenever we were out fishing one time, we were reeling in a little bluegill, and a bass that was probably about 5 pounds came up and ate that bluegill. And I mean, our hook wasn't big enough to like pull out of the bluegill and into the bass, but it ended up, it pulled for a while, almost took the rod out of our hands, because we were not expecting it at all.
Get goosebumps just hearing about that.
But ever since, every time I take Henry fishing, we're going to catch a bass. We're going to catch a bass.
Mm-hmm.
So he Still haven't landed one yet for him, but he wants to target them, and it's like, buddy, whenever you can, whenever you've got the attention span for it, we will
Yeah,
do it.
it's a different world. Because like I said, I grew up just bluegill and sunfish, and when I learned how to catch a gar, that was something different. Because that was the first fish that really pulled me around, because they fight like crazy. But man, catfish, the first time, yeah, that first big fish. And when you're young, big fish is kind of a relative term. It doesn't take a lot for, some bluegills get good size to a kid that age. But I remember having a catfish where I had to hold it with both hands, and just remember how big that felt. And now when I look at pictures of it, got an old Polaroid of it, and the fish is it's a good sized fish, but I couldn't stick both my hands in it now. But that's all I wanted to catch was catfish as a kid. That's all I wanted to catch. And then getting out here, we have two really large lakes where we live now. Those largemouth, that's a different world altogether. We were fishing in a little creek, and I caught estimated about a 5.5 pounder and about 1.5 foot of water. And my wife was down there. It's the one fishing trip that I have not had something to take a picture of. And this is like 2 years ago. So I didn't have my phone with me. She didn't have hers. And, we were catching some big fish around this area. I was like, wow, this is great. Like, this is where we're just pitching off the shore here. There's a little eddy, little calm area where it was away from the current. And it was a weird time of year. It's like June or July. It was really hot. And we caught this nesting, just big mama. And I remember holding it up, and I'm thinking, I'm putting it on my arm and measuring it, so like I can get back home and measure my arm. Like, okay, what's the measurement on this thing? Because it was over 24 inches. And I'm like, I've yet to catch one that big on a lake. We caught one early in 2023 that beat that, but it was in a little inlet off the Arkansas River. So like, we've got these deep pockets in the lake, but we'll catch some 12 to 16s, maybe an 18 every now and then. But these monsters that get up in these creeks, and that's kind of where I'm a big river fisherman, or if I'm on the lake, I'm getting in areas where these little creeks are feeding into it, because that's usually where they kind of hang out. But you get that first big fish, or you even see it, or you miss one, oh, forget it. You'll spend the next 10 years chasing that fish.
Oh yeah.
I love to hear about that with your kid there, because that he'll remember that fish probably for the rest of his life. He may catch bigger ones, obviously, as he gets older, but that one fish, that one moment where he's that little fish, that's that aha moment. That's when he's like, okay, like we need, like, let's go get some giants, Dad. Let's go chase some monsters here.
Yeah, for sure. And I wanted to ask, whenever you say gar, being down there in Arkansas, is that alligator gar?
They're I wouldn't call them alligator gar, and I don't know the specific term for them. They're almost a nuisance, and you'll see them hitting the top water every now and then. But what they'll do, I was fishing in some shallow water, and of course I had my little bobber, and I had the bait about this far, and I kept getting bites. I'm like, what is hitting that? And what had happened was a little chicken liver on it, and he bit it, and then he got wrapped up in the line, and then the hook came out and it hooked him in the back of the head. And so I'm reeling it in, and I mean, the line is just running and it's pulling me a little bit. I'm like that's not a catfish, and he just started running, and he started jumping, and then I saw what it was. I'm like, oh wow. And I get it in the boat, and of course I'm untangling them, and it was easy just to take the hook out. But then Dad told me about, I would take like a little nylon string and wrap it around the hook, and what would happen is they get tangled up in there. So I'm just catching them things. I mean, they get pretty good size. There's some that can get about 3 foot long, not anything like you see in like Texas or anything, but they get pretty rambunctious too. So they'll come up to the boat and they'll slap the top of the water. They'll get your attention. So like if you're really focused in an area and you're fishing it, you're trying to be quiet, and all of a sudden, a 2 foot long gar just flops the water right next to you. It'll startle you. But now they're more of a nuisance, kind of like the big carp. We have a lot of carp in a lot of our rivers, so you'll see them. You'll be fishing, and it's really clear, and you'll see these giant fish and these big schools just kind of go right by you and not pay any attention. And we had one of our guys catch one of those on a little Ned rig, and he's thinking like, it's a smallie, and then it's pulling his kayak around. I'm like, that's not a smallmouth. I don't know what that is, but he pulled up just a big old golden gar about this big and about that big around, and I've got pictures of him just holding it up. That's still like one of my most viewed reels on YouTube. There's a picture of him holding up that tank. But every now and then they bite on something, but they typically just swim right by you and just don't pay no attention.
For sure. All right. And whenever you're out fishing with somebody, what's your typical conversation sound like? What are you typically talking about?
We like to, we're really close in this area. I work for the shop. We will sponsor the local kayak fishing groups, and then what we'll do is I'll fish when I can. I'm always working on Saturday because that's always going to be our busiest day. But sometimes I'll do a little tournament on Sunday, and I like to get out there. But I kind of do it with the understanding I'm not going to take anything if I win anything. But we'll, some buddies from that group, we'll go out on the river or something, and we'll talk a little trash. But really, it's just we like to talk about what we're using. The last thing I want to talk about is work. So like we're not talking about kayaks at all. We're mainly just talking about, what color are you using? What we'll say what we see under the water, and I don't know. I'm competitive on just about 99% of the stuff I do. Fishing is just not one of them. I'm usually doing it to relax and enjoy myself, and I think I'm pretty quiet on the water for the most part. But if I catch something big, everyone around me is probably going to know it. But it's mainly just small talk.
I hear you. All right. Well, we have come to the time of the show where it is what's your favorite. So we are going to dive right into that.
It's time for What's Your Favorite, powered by Nakwa Adventure Gear. Power that fits in the palm of your hand.
All right, so this is What's Your Favorite, powered by Nakwa Adventure Gear. Check out nakwa.com. Like it said, power that fits in the palm of your hand. I've shown it on the video before. They're even their 20 amp hour battery fits in the palm of your hand, and I think it's 4 pounds. So definitely go check those out, and email info@nakwa.com. Give Heidi a little email and say that Faith and Fishing sent you, and have a feeling it would be worth your while to do that. All right,
great company, by the way.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I had been using their products for a while, and had some awesome customer service experience with them.
Yeah.
Whenever I reached out to see if they would be interested in working with the podcast, I had no idea they were a North Carolina company. So
nice. They actually make the Yak Attack battery, the Yak Attack Power Kit. That's a Nakwa battery. So
absolutely,
we sold both Nakwa and the Yak Attack batteries, and that was my first battery. I did the 10 amp hour battery on my first Garmin Striker 4. I could run for days on that, and the fact that the charger comes with the battery, I can't tell you how convenient that is and how easy it is. And it's so easy to sell somebody the convenience of something. It's like, look, you're not, this is waterproof. This is, it's rechargeable. Their charger comes with it. The price is good, and their amp hour. I mean, I've got like 3 of them. I use them for everything from powering the GoPro on the water to, I don't really use fish finders a lot, but man, I couldn't say enough about it. It goes perfectly with a lot of the accessories that are already made for kayaks. Just slip that battery in there, clean setup. So
absolutely. Yeah. I run the 20 amp hour battery for my Garmin Striker 5, and and a 10 amp hour battery for my my Tacticams. So
Yeah.
yeah, they're fantastic. All right. Well, let's get into what's your favorite. So started off, what's your favorite scripture?
Scripture, man, I'm not too well versed on that. So, I mean, I don't really have a specific favorite. I have a tendency to read a lot of random ones. So, there's always someone doing content out there. So when you're scrolling through, and I'm really big on, there's always one that just seems to hit on certain days. And so I'm not, again, I'm not real versed. I couldn't tell you, which verse or what book it is, but I'm there's a lot of them. I mean, John 3:6, the ones that get all the attention, of course, and those are really good. But it's usually those ones that people will put out on like a little short reel or something, and I'm like, man, it's not so much the individual scriptures that have always got my attention, but the way people explain them. One of my best memories was a guy that I played high school football with. When he got out of high school, he played, I believe he played college baseball for a little while, and then he went into, he became a preacher because his brother Sean was, and hearing him talk about it and the way they explain things, and obviously this is something that is, you're getting the youth into it. And what he said to me, and I still think about this daily. So again, this could kind of be my scripture, but it's really kind of an individual that really kind of hit me hard on it. He was talking about explaining what Jesus did, and it was hard to convey into words the sacrifice that was made. So he's up there with his brother, and they're both preaching to us, and he goes, the way I look at it is that we've got these people that are coming after us. People are wanting to harm me. And then my brother comes in and says, don't worry about this. I got this. You just live your life. I'm taking this. I'm taking this burden from you. And then sacrifices himself. And I still get a little choked up because I mean, just knowing these two people and then him saying that. And of course, every time I go, it always gets the wheels turning, things like, God is invested in your future. The devil is invested in your past. So a lot of people that don't feel like they can go to church because, they may not, they think that they're sinners, which we're all sinners, of course. And I think people like that are invaluable, especially in the church, because you got your churchgoers that are just your diehards. It's getting those people that don't feel like they're good enough to be in a church setting yet. And that's what people like that do, in my opinion, is, getting your imperfect people. Because, what did Jesus do? Who did he hang out with? He hung out with the sinners. He hung out with, the deplorables, I guess you could call it. But, he saw value in that. Why can't we? And, him talking, my friend talking about, his brother dying for his sins, and so he can live a full life. And I still think about that today. That would be my favorite. It may not be scripture, but it was just a way that it was explained to me that just still sticks today in what I do. Just trying to live right. So
For sure. What about a particular story from the Bible? Was there one of those that was your favorite?
The story, again, I had to read it at a young age, and I didn't retain as much. My favorite is honestly and being of a sports-minded person, David and Goliath. That was always and I think a lot of us are raised on that. Obviously, I mean that's a story that's been told 1,000 times, but you can apply that story to almost every single hardship. What is your Goliath? You're David. You're trying to tackle life. You're trying to tackle this huge burden that you've got, and that was always something that a coach that I had always told us is, make sure you got your rock. Maybe make sure you got your sling ready, to tackle that next thing. Because I think we had coaches that kind of introduced us to a group called FCA, which is Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And, he always kind of talked about that a lot, whereas, applying, your Bible story to something that was happening in life or something you're going to go through. Because a lot of them know, we're kids. We think, everything's great. And this is obviously before the internet and everything. So like, him telling us, you're going to go through these times that are going to be really hard, and just being ready for that, just knowing that, he's, God's not going to give you anything you can't handle. And that was another thing that really stuck with me was, I've always been good at handling stress, and just thinking that is okay. It's nothing I can't handle. It's not the end of the world. Everything always seems really bad when you're going through it, but nothing is permanent. It's always temporary. So.
For sure. All right. So your favorite fish to catch?
Oh, I'm a bass guy. Largemouth bass, I have the most fun with smallmouth, and that's probably one of my favorites. But to me, there's just something about pulling a largemouth bass, not as aggressive as a smallmouth, but a little more athletic. You're jumping around, they're running a little bit. It takes some skill to keep a largemouth on. So you have to keep that tension. You have to, when it jumps out, make sure the tip of that rod's down, and just the challenge of it, because they're a finicky bunch too. Depending on where you're at, they're not knowing where the patterns are. You can be on them one day, and then you can just go back to that same spot, throw that same color, and nothing. So the challenge of it has always been, to me, and my wife's the same way. It's just, there's something about bringing in that big bucket mouth, largemouth in. But we spent more time on the rivers and creeks this last year, and we just absolutely enjoyed it. Catching, 5 or 6 different species of fish, but man, there's just something about that largemouth when it hits and when you bring it in, and obviously the photo op, having that big open mouth and that big tank you're holding up for the camera, doing the, making it look huge for the camera, of course. But yeah, I enjoy the experience more than the fish. I think, I love to fish, but I live for the environment of it. The water, being out in the early morning when you get a little bit of that fog rolling off, and then out there in the evening when you can kind of see some of the animals getting ready for the night, and some of the fish starting to kind of get a little more active. And I just enjoy being on the water, and I live in one of the best places for it, in my opinion.
For sure. Yeah. I love a sunset on the water.
Oh man.
I love like going to the west side of the lake
Mhm.
and letting the sun set, and then start paddling east, and then turn around and I get to watch the sunset
Yeah.
again. And then
Is there a bad view from a kayak?
there absolutely not.
I don't think I've ever said like, just the view here isn't that great. No matter when the sun's going down, just being able to see that over the water. And then when the sun's coming, same thing, when everything kind of lifts, the life starts coming out, you got birds everywhere, and it just, it's phenomenal. I've never had a bad time on a kayak. I really haven't. Even when I forget something, or I forget the key gear, I'm still on the water. I can get skunked that day, but I always try to find something to enjoy, because I'm there to relax. Fishing, catching a big fish helps, obviously, but at the end of the day, I mean, I'm on the water. I'm enjoying myself. I'm relaxing. I'm decompressing. I'm getting all that stress out, and I'm just enjoying my time out there.
All right. So favorite fish to catch was the bucket mouth. What's your favorite fish to fish for?
Smallmouth. Smallmouth. It just, and that's something I grew up catching, and it's something I've kind of gotten back into. The fact that you can take a rod with you anywhere where there's a little bit of stream and catch sometimes a really surprising. I've caught some big smallmouth and some surprisingly small bodies of water. Sometimes the water level will come up, and then as it comes back down, you'll get some big fish that are trapped in those little pockets. And you see a little. To me, you ever go across a creek or a little bridge or something, you look down, you say, man, that looks really fishy. And that's usually where those are usually hotbeds for smallmouth fish. I enjoy creek fishing adventures, John that does that channel. And he literally built a YouTube channel off of driving around fishing creeks and rivers. And even fishes some little reservoirs around a freeway sometimes and catches little bluegills and stuff. But just seeing some of those creeks and a lot of cover and a lot of laydowns, and it's like, man, it's like I'm working right now, but I sure would like to pull over and just throw a lure in there and see what's in there. And smallmouth. Smallmouth always surprise me. The top water, they'll hit top water. They'll hit, bottom creature bait. They'll hit, swim baits. Like they hit everything. And when they hit it, it feels like a freight train hitting that bait sometimes. And I love it. They always feel heavier than they really are because they just fight so hard. And the fact that it takes so long for those fish to get that big, I think that I saw it was like, when you get a fish that's like 16 or 18 inches, it took them 8 years to get that big, which is a definite thing for your size limits and minding those size limits, because the amount of time it takes for those fish to get a decent size, keeping them healthy. That's a big thing with me too.
Absolutely. And I forgot whenever we do what's your favorite, to put that Nakwa logo up there. So it's up there now.
Well, we both talked about them.
We did.
They got their plug in.
Absolutely. All right. So your favorite fish to eat?
Favorite fish to eat. I'm a big tilapia fan. I grew up eating catfish, but man, tilapia, I just I don't know. And it's funny because we live in one of the hottest trout fisheries in the country. I'm just not a big fan of trout. And I've never been a big fan of eating bass. I strictly do that for the sport of it. Growing up eating catfish, I got so burned out. I think of that as a kid because that's all I caught and all I ate. But man, tilapia, the amount of stuff you can do to that, season it, sandwiches, stews, like there's so many things you can do to it, or just fry it up and make the best fish tacos ever.
Okay. Absolutely. All right. So your favorite fishing snack?
It's got to be that Slim Jim. any jerky. Usually, I think my go-to is usually the Jack Links. Just beef stick, and I don't go pepper or teriyaki. I just like the standard stuff because last thing you want to be dealing with is heartburn out there on the water. I've kind of gotten to that age where I got to be a little careful on what I'm eating, on how I'm going to feel the rest of the day. But jerky, I'll usually do beef jerky, and body armor is kind of what I've been doing, kind of the sports drink, getting that potassium in there, especially when you're out there in the heat, and that hydration. And I'm not a big carbonated person, so I usually kind of steer toward your juices and your sports drinks and water. But that sun can do some crazy stuff to you, and especially here in the South, when you got 100% humidity and you got a heat index of 120 and you're out there on the water, which is basically like being on a mirror, making sure you got something in you and you're staying hydrated. So I usually focus a lot more on the fluid part of it, but man, that beef jerky, that simple snack that kind of get that energy, that's kind of my go-to there.
Absolutely. I'm still mad at Jack Links for changing the original beef sticks so that you used to be able to go to the gas station, get them for 99 cents.
Yeah.
Now they're shaped different and they cost more. And
there's nothing cheap about any of that. It seems like, I remember the same thing, just that little 99-cent stick. Again, I go with it's the Jack Links. It's the black package where it's got like the really thick, just something I can just chew on a little bit. And it's got that energy property to it. So Jack Link's not a sponsor, so I enjoy it though.
For sure. All right. So your favorite lure to throw?
That's funny. That seems to change from year to year. I started out first year on the lake. I couldn't. I caught everything on creature bait, just a little craw. There's a lot of crawfish, crawdads around here. And I threw those a lot on like a Texas rig. Man, this last year, it seemed like we caught everything on a paddle-tailed swim bait. And that's my go-to. If nothing is hitting, I use it's a Kitech. I do a 2.8 if I'm doing it on a trailer, but anything 4 inches or under with the paddle tail to kind of get that little tail action. Anything that mimics what they're eating on, which is usually bait fish. That's my go-to. That's if I can only take one thing, it's either a plastic worm in green pumpkin or a paddle tail in kind of a shad color.
All right. And I don't need GPS coordinates or secret spots or anything, but what's your favorite body of water to fish?
Oh, Buffalo National River. And I like the lower part a little bit better because it stays deeper. Uh, you know, it goes up really quickly, but it also comes down really quickly. And the upper part is usually the part that goes lower the quickest. That lower part where it runs into the White River, you'll get some trout come up there every now and then, but also some really, really good smallmouth fishing.
Awesome. All right. And last but not least, what's your favorite time of year to fish?
Oh man. I is again, and as much as we enjoy these the largemouth bass fishing, hitting that early spawn, and usually as soon as it's bearable but still uncomfortable, that's usually when you get the best fish. So I usually like to go out there, around mid-April. Every now and then, if the weather's right, a March day can be good, but that April, right before you get into May, that's usually the best time to go around here. As far as on the river, fall by far. Just not only do you have the scenery, but man, the water's starting to cool down a little bit more, and fish are starting to feed, getting ready for that next transition, and the smallmouth bite just seems to be really, really good during that time.
Awesome. All right, man. Well, we're going to start wrapping things up. Go ahead, let us know what's coming up next for the Bearded Paddler.
Well, what we're going to be doing is, obviously I've been doing a lot of my videos on specific kayak manufacturers. So I'll do one on Hobie, do one on Jackson, and I'll try to get all of them knocked out by, just really talking about where they're at today, where I think they're going, things I wish they'd do a little differently, but just kind of letting people know what's coming out. And I'm going to be doing more on the water stuff this year on rivers and creeks. So, again, most of my on the water videos are on lake accesses. It's calm, flat water, but, kind of putting some more stuff to the test on the water, seeing how they handle. There's a lot of great stuff out there, but specifically, I'm working on a video now where Timu, which that was kind of if anybody's watched or looked at anything to do with fishing gear or kayak gear, you'll see those apps and those ads. Well, they reached out to me, and so I'm closing up a video where I got to pick what I wanted to review, and are they worth it? And that's kind of what I'm doing there. Is I'm not getting any kind of what I would call premium stuff, but like rigging stuff, like T-bolts and eyelets and cup holders and things like that, and seeing if it's really worth it. So that's probably going to be in the immediate future. And then obviously me and my wife doing the live stream on Sundays at 7 p.m. Central Time. And of course, that'd be 8 p.m. Eastern there. But, continuing the live stream and, kind of shoring that up and cleaning that up. And we just, kind of a way to kind of interact with the community and, bounce any questions. Because, again, the interaction's what I enjoy the most of it. Anybody can do a video, but the questions and interacting with people that have genuine questions, and I like helping people out. I always have, always will. So
absolutely. And I joined on the first one, and I thought I thought y'all did a fantastic job. I didn't get to stay for the whole thing, but the nice thing about that format is it is kind of a floating thing. You can kind of come in and out.
Yeah. And I think that's great because we can kind of see up at the top, how many people are watching, and we do it on Facebook and on YouTube there. But, it's just kind of a way for me to interact a little bit more and on a personal level with, people that are watching the videos, and, you don't have to wait for me to respond to a comment. I'm right there. And then of course, if you want my wife's perspective on stuff, she's given it too. It's an interesting dynamic, and I kind of had to talk her into it a little bit, but just telling her, it's like, more than you think you do. She's kind of filled in some days at the store, just kind of helping out. Obviously free labor, but I told her, it's like you have you're not talking to an employee. Sometimes it's just nice to hear it from your point of view, and it could be the same thing that I'm saying, but you're hearing it from a different person. And sometimes that's just kind of comforting, someone that's not in the industry, someone that's just, they're a consumer just like the rest of us are here.
Absolutely. And go ahead and want to give you an opportunity to shout out any sponsors, supporters, anybody you want to say thank you to. The floor is yours.
Really, the only thing that only kind of sponsorship I've got is Waterland sunglasses, waterlandco.com. You can use the Bearded Paddler for 15% off. It's a product that I use, and they give me a little bit of discount for being, kind of on staff. I don't receive any commissions for that, but they're good quality glasses, and kind of like, with Naqua, just I always like to support good companies. I try to stay away from the sponsorships as much as I can, unless something just kind of comes up that I agree with. I do kind of like to stay in that unbiased space. I get a lot of people reaching out, not saying I won't listen, but, we get a lot of weird stuff too. Like, a lot of overseas companies that maybe, like, well, I'm preaching some quality stuff. I tell them, like, I feel kind of weird for me to start trying to talk to people about some cheaper stuff, even though I'm doing the Temu video, but I think that's more of a curiosity than anything. But
right.
As far as, one thing I would want to shout out is our website is ozarkmtc.com. It's a great resource. So the people that are setting that up, that's the company I work for, not me personally, but they have, it's a one-stop shop where you can look at everything that we carry. We do ship accessories for free. And also it's a place you can go on to live chat. And also you can get on there and you can look at different manufacturers. You can see what their individual warranties are on their products, their weight capacities, how they're figured. So it's a good, they've made it to where it's a really good informative site, and to where you're not having to go to a lot of different places. So obviously you can buy stuff when you're there, but it's a good research tool as well, if anybody's looking at something like that. So
absolutely. Yeah, it's funny. Like, anytime you get into the content creation space, some of the things that people reach out to you and try to say you'd be perfect for this, and it's like, I don't think that the Faith and Fishing podcast would be perfect for advertising women's jewelry. I just don't think that
I get a lot of that, and I'm not trying to discourage people from reaching out to me. I'm open to stuff, obviously, and I've done a couple of things, but I think it would, for one thing, it would be weird for me to be sponsored by a company that is a rival of a company that we sell at the place I work at. So I'm never going to do anything to contradict that, unless, and if it's something, if they're that much better than what we're selling, then we need to look at carrying that product in our stores. But so that, I think that kind of keeps me away from the space there. So I'm not going to get a sponsorship from a kayak company because I'm selling them all. So I'm never going to push one kayak over others, unless if it's something I'm really believe in that is right for a specific person. That's what I'm doing. But I sell everything from, $450 kayaks all the way up to, $6,000. So, we don't work on commission, which is great. So the people that are working here, they're not trying to push people and oversell something, because it doesn't make any difference to them whether they're spending, $3,000 or $300. And that's kind of a good place to be in, I think. Makes for a better shopping experience too, when you don't have someone just hounding you on something. So
absolutely. Yeah. I think my favorite so far of the random companies that has reached out was it was like a manscaping like trimmer called Smooth My Balls.
That's unique. That is unique.
I was like, yeah, I don't think that would go well.
No. And I think the weirdest one I've had was it was a company out of China that they did kind of 3D printer knockoffs of Yak Attack. And I'm a big Yak Attack fan. I love that they're a US company. And it wasn't that they reached out to me, it was they were so aggressive on it. And the fact that they were so aggressive really turned me off to it. I'm like, look, because they're saying, "Oh, this is great quality. It's a great quality." I'm reading reviews online of people saying this didn't fit, and this. I was like, okay. I told them, like, I'm never going to. If I ever were to push a product that didn't benefit the people listening to me, they're never going to listen to me. And I'm saying I'm not going to do that. And I'm not going to do it for, $50 and a video. And and I'd also told them, I was like, these videos take a lot of effort. So if you're wanting me to do a 10 or a 15-minute video on your product and you're not valuing my time more than that, for one, it's not a quality product. And two, I'm not going to put the time and effort that it takes to edit a video and to get a video out there and to push a video on social media just because this person thinks I should. So, that's another thing too, is when you get into the editing and all that, there's a lot of time and effort that comes into that. And, some of these people they want to give you affiliate links and, hey, you sell our products, we'll throw a couple of quarters your way. And I'm like, well, there's more to it than that. And I don't want to be greedy, but also I do value my time. So, I'm here to help people to provide a service to hopefully help people find something that will make their time on the water more fulfilling. And if people want to sell something, that's great, but I may not be the best for everyone out there as far as doing that. So,
absolutely. All right, and wanted to give you a chance to shout out your socials, YouTube channel, website, anything like that. Go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So socials, it's the Bearded Paddler on everything. I'm on Facebook. I do Instagram. So my Facebook and Instagram is a little different from my YouTube channel. I may do some funny reels of people doing fish or, people losing fish. I try to have a little bit more fun on the Facebook and the Instagram. YouTube at the Bearded Paddler. If somebody's looked at any kayak videos, they've probably seen me. I've got a whole library of pretty much everything that we carry, and then even done some on the water stuff, and then some opinion pieces there as well. So you can check me out on all that. I do the live stream on both Facebook and YouTube simultaneously, and then we get comments and answer comments from both platforms there. So.
Absolutely. Well, Andy, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. This has been a fantastic one, and I look forward to having you on the show again, man.
Absolutely, man. Anytime. And, as I said, I enjoy doing shows like this with good people. And as I said, the space that we're in is just full of people like you, like me, like everyone else. And I said, I definitely enjoy the fellowship of it, just people bouncing ideas off of each other, helping each other out instead of trying to tear each other's, socials or channels down. So not saying that doesn't happen, but it's very rare or at least from my experience so far. So.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again and wish you all the best, man.
Hey, appreciate you, man. Thanks a lot, Cam.
All right. So, yeah, we're not going to hang around too much longer. We're just going to say a quick prayer, and we are going to close it out. God, thank you so much for this podcast. Thank you for Andy and what he means to this community and what he means to so many others. Thank you for what he's doing in his channel and with his presence. And thank you for whoever it is that's listening to this right now. Pray that they got something out of this podcast. Pray that you meet them where they are and give them what they need right now. And God, we ask that you continue to bless this podcast, continue to put on a show in our lives and in the lives of everybody listening right now. We love you, and it is in Jesus' name that we pray. Amen. All right. That's going to do it for this episode. Y'all take care and God bless.
Thank you for listening to the Faith and Fishing podcast. Please consider supporting those that support us. Jade's Jigs lead-free finesse tackle. Use promo code FNF10 at jadesjigs.com for 10% off. Save your outdoors. Stop losing your gear. Use promo code FNFP15 at saveyouroutdoors.com for 15% off. Omnia Fishing. Check out Premium, Premium Pro, and their Ambassador program. Use promo code FNF10 for 10% off at omniafishing.com. And if it's your first order, use promo code FNF15 for 15% instead. Mr. B Lure Company. High-quality handmade baits made right here in the U.S. MrBLureCompany.com. Use promo code faithnfishn for 15% off your first purchase. Get outdoors, pedal and paddle. Check them out at the shop in Greensboro, North Carolina, or at shopgetoutdoors.com for all your paddling and cycling needs. And Nocqua Adventure Gear, lighting, power, and all the connectors at Nocqua.com. Please rate, review, subscribe on whatever app you're listening on. That's going to do it for this episode. Y'all take care and God bless.